Buen día, Internet. Somos los abogados de Chávez y Valco, el equipo legal para su llave de inmigración. Yo soy abogado Benjamin Hamilton. Conmigo is a confused attorney, Andrew Craven. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Ben. How are you?
I am doing amazing. Normally, when you see our faces, we're here to talk about all things employment-based immigration with our video series on all of the different non-immigrant visas and immigrant visa options. But today we're here to talk about a little bit of news. Andrew, what's our topic for today's video?
Today we get to talk about the Dignity Act, recently proposed by Congresswoman Salazar.
Now, the interesting thing about this is it is a immigration reform proposal put forth by Republicans. That is actually the interesting thing here, is because up until now, obviously, we've seen things put forth solely by Democrats, by the Biden administration. Obviously, the Republicans just say no, 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 and our response is always, well, what is your idea? And well, we have at least one now on the books. So, put forth by Congresswoman Maria Salazar from Florida, but she also has some co-sponsors, including Dan Newhouse, John Curtis, Pete Sessions from here in Texas, uh, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, Tom Reed, and Peter Mayer, I think is how you say that. Um, and so we wanted to do a little video where we kind of took a look at this and provided some of our commentary, and then maybe compared and contrast it to some of the other proposals that are out there. Again, this is merely a proposal. It's probably not going to go anywhere, but at least it gives us a framework for if they were to do a deal, what are some of the things that we're going to be getting from the Republican side, right? Because up until now, we know what the Democratic side sort of wants. So, Andrew, this is going to be fun. Because obviously we don't have a detailed text of this bill. What do we have is a summary, highlights, bullet points, and it's a lot of, I would say, flowery language buzzwords that people like to hear, but maybe don't mean anything, but we'll take a look at it. So, Andrew, what's the first kind of section of this act going to deal with?
So first, it's really talking about border security and enforcement, because it wouldn't be a Republican bill otherwise.
Yes, we know the Republican position is enforcement first, and then we'll figure out the rest of the stuff, right? And of course, at least the way that Democrats get painted in terms of their position is like amnesty first, and then maybe we'll do this other stuff, right? So, what's our first point here in regard to border security and enforcement?
So we have authorization. Sorry, it would authorize funding to fully secure America's borders. My favorite part, at no cost to American taxpayers.
Um, how it would be at no cost, I don't know. We've heard that before. I mean, the Trump administration promised that, Mexico would pay for the wall, and Mexico, of course, said hell no. So how it would be at no cost? Um, I mean, there's some stuff kind of farther down in here that would allude to that, but obviously we know that's never going to happen. It's not going to be at no cost to the American taxpayer.
Well, of
Um,
course, you all remember, like, the follow-up to "At no cost to the American taxpayer" was how, and he started coming up with things like, "Well, we'll tax imports from Mexico," which is great until you look at the fact that that means that we're now just paying more for our goods from Mexico instead of just not paying for it.
Wait, you mean those avocados are going to get even more expensive?
Your avocados, your limes, tequila, anything else you get from Mexico, cheese. I'm told there are
Um,
certain places that make really good cheese.
and of course, if you at the time of this recording of this video, we have banned imports of avocados from Mexico. Period. So I guess rush out and buy as many as you can and flip those babies on Craigslist. Um, so the second one here is one that actually makes, I think, perfect sense, no matter what your political persuasion is. Implements best border technology available, including radar, cameras, infrared, secure communications, and autonomous detection technology. Um, which again, I mean, it's a simple of and again, number two kind of defeats. Actually, let's just go to number three, and we can kind of talk about how number two defeats number three. Restarts all currently paused border infrastructure contracts and increases funding for physical border infrastructure. Again, increases funding supposedly at no cost to the American taxpayer. So they're basically saying, no, we need to go back to building a wall. And of course, my comment is, well, if we have best border technology, why do we need a wall? At least in certain areas of the southern border. I don't know if you've been there. They are mountainous deserts in the middle of nowhere. Yet they insist on building a wall, which would be horribly expensive. There's no way this is going to be at no cost to taxpayers. When couldn't you get the same effect out of just a drone? Like literally put a drone up and you have some border patrol guys in their trucks, drone spots someone, says, "Yo, guys, sector 3, there's some people, go get them." And then they go get them. Why do you need to build a wall in areas like that? Again, if they're talking about some of the more, areas and like El Paso and areas where they're more urban, talking about, hey, maybe we need to like reinforce or improve walls, especially to combat tunneling. So, okay, cool. We can talk about that. That makes some more sense. But if we're talking about, no, we literally need a wall that stretches from border to border. Why? you know,
Well, and
we don't need
especially
the
why
great.
I was just gonna say
Well, it's,
why it's $7 billion plus however many millions or billions of maintenance per year. It's kind of a hefty price tag for something that's not going to stop
and
overstays,
then
tunnels.
and then yeah, well, it ignores the fact that of the sections they did build, there's plenty of videos of people going right over it, through it, around it, and that nearly 50% of all people in this country unlawfully entered legally and then overstayed. So building a wall really isn't going to defeat that. Again, I'm not saying you don't have border security. I'm just saying there seems to be a more cost-effective way to do that, which is point two. I don't really need point three so much if I have point two. Um, so then what's our next point here?
Then we have hire 3,000 new Department of Homeland Security border security personnel, prioritize hiring of military veterans and law enforcement agents, followed by creating a task force to detect and destroy cartel smuggling tunnels along the southern border.
Kind of feel like the second one there about the task force. It's like, don't we already like have people that is their job in within like the border patrol and working probably with the ATF? Seems redundant. The 3,000 new border security personnel. It's one of those things you're saying again. You're saying this is at no cost, but how are you going to employ 3,000 people foreseeable for the next 20, 30 years and it be at no cost? I'm sometimes more focused on making sure that the people you have have the tools that they need and b are high quality, because in particular border patrol has been somewhat notorious for terrible hiring practices and having tons of problems, tons of agents getting arrested and going to jail for various things. um, so if I'm just going to hire a bunch of more goons, and not train them, not teach them, but also not give them necessarily all the tools they may need to do their job effectively, what's the point? So I guess this is one of those where it's kind of like, where are the details in this, and where are these people going to go, and what are they going to do? Um, what's the next one here? This one's fun.
Mandates 100% nationwide e-verify to ensure all American businesses are hiring legal workers.
Yeah. What do you think? Just U.S. industry, businesses. Let's just say I don't know, Facebook, Google, Amazon. For example, how do you think they're going to feel about that?
Not well, especially since when you really think about it, this isn't something that's just going to affect employers who want to hire foreign nationals, right? Like we deal with folks that they know what they're doing, they want to hire a foreign national and go through the legal process. This would essentially say if you want to open your doors and go out and hire some, you're now going to have to go through e-verify, set up an account, work with the government, get all this authorization, just one more step for your HR department. On top of the fact that, I mean, you're just adding a step for everyone that wants to hire. Is this also going to apply to mom and pop stores or just people that employ 100 workers, 1,000. Like, there's my
It's
two
kind of one of
cents.
these things that is somewhat of a boondoggle because we know that in Georgia they did mandatory e-verify, and then there's been tons of follow-up studies to see to assess its effectiveness, and it's found to be pretty ineffective in terms of curbing employment of illegal aliens. So this is kind of one of these things where it's like it's a system wrought with problems, and it's just like one, Republicans hold this up as well. This would solve everything, and it's like not really. Um, it probably wouldn't really solve that much. And I don't know, the same people that are against, I don't know, gun registries. Ooh, because we don't want to register anything with the federal government. This is evil. But then you flip it over to employment, and they're like, yeah, sure, let's do this. And you're like, okay.
And
Um,
again, all
I just
employment.
think
So hiring someone that you already know, like very basic, it's a US citizen, like you're still gonna have to go through this process.
it's just at the end of the day, right or wrong, there that specific provisions is going to get a ton of pushback from like businesses and chambers of commerce and stuff. Um, so right or wrong, that's going to be a hard one to keep in there. Um, I love this one. The next one increases criminal penalties for illegal border crossings and immediately deports illegal immigrants who commit crimes. I mean, obviously, this is one of the things that the left hates the most and they want to get rid of is the fact that they created a criminal penalty for illegal border crossings because immigration is technically civil. So the vast majority of like violations and stuff that happens within the immigration system are not criminal. That was something they added kind of later and applies to illegal border crossings and like increased criminal penalties. I mean, what are you going to do? So someone crosses illegally, you catch them, and you're going to waste the time of taking them to federal court and prosecuting them and then housing them in a federal prison. And you're going to tell me we're going to do this at no cost to the American taxpayer? I mean, that's a bunch of BS. It's like, dude, if you catch a guy at the border, I mean, just throw him back. I'll probably try again tomorrow, but I mean, at least we're not wasting everyone's money trying to prosecute somebody who, for the most part, largely has no criminal record and is just coming to try to work and, fleeing probably some pretty horrible circumstances and are just looking for a job. They're not a criminal per se. Now, obviously, if they catch one who does have a criminal record, that's a totally different story. Um, and those people should obviously are the ones that we do want to bar. But again, I'm not saying don't deport the guy necessarily. What I'm saying is why do we got to bring this? Why do we got to bring criminal law into it? Why we got to go through the cost of persecuting and incarcerating people whose only crime was trying to enter the country? Um,
I actually had a question about that because technically, given that immigration is civil, right? You have a right to have an attorney, but you do not have a right to have one appointed. Now, if you threw immigration law into criminal, technically at the border, wouldn't they have the right to request an attorney at that point if you wanted to hit them with a criminal penalty?
well, yeah, it depends what you're doing. I mean, the Trump administration, rather than just kicking these guys back across the border, which was kind of was being done previously, the people being caught at the border. What they were doing was literally rounding them all up and marching them into a federal court and like in mass, not like individually, but like in big groups, and essentially charging them with a crime. I mean, you would think that in that case, you would then at that point have a right to counsel, but that's criminal counsel, not immigration counsel. So this isn't like, so again, if they're just catching and kicking you back over the border, there's no right to counsel there. But if they're going to prosecute you, but again, it's just like, why? Um, who are we? Now, again, it's totally different. Like, let's say you catch the coyote, right? That's different.
Yeah.
You do want to go after them, right? I'm talking about the person who's just trying to come across to work and find a better life or unite with family, right? Again, I'm not talking about the criminals, the drug smugglers, the coyotes. That's a whole different ballgame. And I really don't have too many issues with going after them really hard. Um, and we see another thing here expands U.S. authorities to go after transnational criminals, smugglers, human traffickers, drug traffic. Okay. Um, again, you have to kind of know what the details of that is. What agencies? What are you doing? Um, establishes 4 regional processing centers to house asylum claimants at the border to end catch and release policies while cases are being determined. This is kind of a tricky one, right? Because we know under like the Obama administration, if someone claimed asylum, a lot of the time they would catch them and then release them into the United States and give them a hearing date to hear their asylum claim. The Trump administration obviously stopped doing that. They basically said, no, you have to wait in Mexico. So they'd show up to the border and they say, no, 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 go wait. And it created all of these like really dire encampments just across the border of people waiting for their cases. And so I guess this is kind of them trying to do like the middle ground. Like we don't want to catch and release, but we also don't like the stuff going on in Mexico was pretty horrific. I mean, it was horrific, period. Is this them trying to find a middle ground where, hey, you know, we can't release them, but we'll actually put them somewhere. But again, put them somewhere where? I mean, a lot of the places that people were being put in the United States are being run by private contractors, and some of those are pretty horrible. There's one that's famously referred to as like the ice box because it was so cold, and you see, you know, people in these large rooms with like chain link fences and you know, kind of dividing people up, and they're given those little like NASA blankets, and it's like that's just not kind of how we want the U.S. to be seen. I guess my bigger question would be, what is your processing ability? Meaning, there's am I holding this person for a couple of days, or am I holding this person for weeks and months? Which the weeks and months is just like, no, that's no. I mean, if it
No,
was
I
something
think
where it was like, we need to hold them for like a couple of days because we have the officers here to process the initial claims pretty quickly, you know, to where like they can be seen in 24 to 48 hours by a USCIS asylum adjudicator. Maybe that's a little bit different story, but you know, that's how it's not going to play out.
no, I think you're exactly right. Like the real issue is going to be like, can you process people quick enough? Because I mean, you know, you can't just sit forever with folks in, you know, whatever, what are they calling these processing centers, or just sitting at the border in these makeshift encampments. Like sooner or later, a decision has to be made whether or not they can have asylum and start going through that process, or if they need to figure something else out. But you just can't have people sitting in limbo in these just horrible situations for months, years, what have you.
Well, you know, the next one, the next couple ones sort of address this. What one of the major issues with, again, this is not necessarily you and me, our core practice, right? Obviously, our firm does all immigration, and we have attorneys in our firm that do focus a lot more on deportation and litigation and things like that. That's not our specific form. But if you go down these next couple ones, in terms of enacts last in, first out judicial policy, hires 1,700 new immigration court personnel to rule on asylum cases faster. I mean, obviously, those things are actually some of the big ones. Is that, you know, there's like a million case backlog. I mean, there's people that are getting hearing dates 3-4 years out. Like they're getting picked up and getting a hearing date 3 years out, 4 years out. That is absolutely absurd and unacceptable. That, you know, one of the biggest things that we need to do is to essentially speed this system up. And again, we're talking about immigration judges, immigration courts, like the asylum officers in courts, just having the staffing to process cases in a somewhat fair and humane manner, speed, I guess you would say, because to enter the country, apply for asylum, and then you realize you're going to have to wait like 5 years for any type of, I mean, that's just absurd, that they can't, you know, move on this stuff faster. So obviously I think these ones, in terms of trying to speed up processing, I would think that there would be general consensus on these, from both sides. Like, no, we do need more judges. We do need to speed it. Now, with the judges, the dirty little secret is that they're not actual courts. They're part of the Department of Justice, and a lot of the judges are ex-ICE attorneys. So it's like, how is that like in any way just if the judge came from the same bench as the government counsel? You know, there obviously needs to be some. They need to expand their hiring practices to include more people than former ICE attorneys. and maybe try to make it an actual court. But anyway, um, and there's this curbs or immigration. I mean, great. I mean, we all agree we should try to address the root causes. Wouldn't it be amazing if these countries were such that the people didn't need or want to leave them? Of course, I don't know exactly how you're going to solve that problem. But I mean, it is a sort of noble idea, at least. But again, how are you going to do that? I don't know. That's like such a big lift. All right. Let's jump into the second section here. This is kind of like the first one. Again, that's the one where it's like there's some good stuff, some kind of like why you're wasting time and money, but it sounds like you just want to hit the Republican buzzwords. But the crux of this thing, I think, is this kind of middle section here, and that is the what do we do with the illegals that are already here? This creates an immediate legal status and streamlined path for dreamers. Okay, I mean, that's one of these areas where there seems to be a general consensus. Like dreamers are the ones that came here as children, were essentially raised here, had nothing to do with their unlawful entry to this country or overstay, and that many of them went to school here. English is, they don't really know their home country. It's like, great, we should, because right now all they get is what's called DACA, which is basically, hey, a promise we're not going to deport you, and here's a work authorization, and then they just have that forever, right? Because there's really no way to move past that. So I think what they're trying to say here is that we do want to create a more permanent status for dreamers and an actual pathway for them to residency. Now, they really haven't necessarily laid it out because we're going to get into this quote dignity program, and I'm not sure if dreamers are really going to be part of that or if they're just going to be kept separate. But again, clearly there's consensus on a pathway for dreamers. But Andrew, tell me about this dignity program.
Well, so let's see. 10-year program. Through the 10-year dignity program, undocumented immigrants will be provided a chance to work, earn legal status, pay restitution. Not really sure what they're paying restitution for, and get right with the law.
I like that
Uh,
one. You got to get right with the law, boy. Cool. I mean, that's what they all want. That is their end goal. That is their dream. Their dream was not to come to the country illegally and work in the shadows, right? Their dream was always to, primarily, have security for their family. But second, they want to get right with the law. But anyway, they must comply with all federal and state laws. Okay, pass a criminal background check. Duh. I mean, you do any immigration thing and they do a background check. Um, they must work as a family caregiver and pay taxes. Work as a family caregiver. What? Like, I don't think that means they literally need to like be a nanny. Does this mean they like no deadbeat dads allowed? Like, hey, if you got kids, you got to take care of them. If you're behind on child support, you can't take part in the dignity program. Family care, or does this just mean that like to
is that just
qualify,
their
you need to have?
is that like this is that you're a stay-at-home spouse, but the other spouse works? Actually,
Yeah,
is it's
that's that
work
that
or
that.
serve as a caregiver? Or
So
is this
what
like the
if
kid that's taking
you? Yeah, what if you're? So I guess if you're like 21 and live in your parents' basement and play video games all day, you can't participate in the dignity program because you're not a family caregiver nor do you work. So they're basically saying you either
Yeah,
have to prove you have to prove you have a job, which is ironic because if you're proving you have a job to enter the dignity program, you're admitting to unlawful employment, right? Or work as a family caregiver. So we're saying, hey, if you have a job or you're a stay-at-home mom, you're good. Um, so if you're unemployed, you're kind of screwed and pay taxes.
well,
Um,
and also, as you pointed out, like 21-year-olds, I don't know what I was doing at 21, and they don't list out students anywhere on here. High school, college, masters. So if you're out there bettering yourself but not in the workforce yet, does that mean you can't participate?
I mean, I guess the assumption is that if you're in college, you would be a dreamer. But I mean, we're getting to the point now. I mean, again, based on the original definition of DACA, if they were to pass a law, they could redefine who qualifies to expand it, right? But as of right now, it applies to a very specific group in terms of when they arrived. That's like pre 2007, and we're under a certain age as of 2012. So people right now, you have people right now in college that don't necessarily qualify for DACA unless they expand the definition. But yeah, that's one where it's like, I think we need some more detail. But basically, they want you to prove that you're working, or you're taking care of your kids. Okay, yeah, I mean, we know Republicans, for example, are really big on work requirements for like food stamps and stuff like that. The SNAP program. So okay, they must contribute to the American Worker Fund to begin the program. This is one that's interesting. The Dignity program makes work authorization and protection from removal proceedings as long as conditions are being met. Dignity participants will pay $10,000 in restitution during the 10 years of the program, must check in with DHS every 2 years, must remain in good public standing. So obviously it'll be similar to DACA, right? Whereas DACA right now, they can apply for a 2-year work permit, and then they have to just keep renewing that every 2 years. So it'd be similar to what we have with DACA and deferred action, right? Oh, for 10 years, you'll be able to apply for a 2-year work permit, keep renewing it every 2 years. Obviously, you got to be good, because if you get arrested during those 10 years, you'd no longer be eligible to keep renewing. But the whole restitution thing is like, you must pay restitution. For what? What are they paying restitution for? For having come into the country illegally? I mean, if they're working and paying taxes, because again, you can get an ITIN. You can't get a social, but you can get an ITIN number and pay taxes. Why do they need to pay $10,000?
Yeah, as you pointed out, like specialized employment, but I worked for a while working, doing like waivers and stuff. And generally these folks like start their own business. That way you don't have to deal with an employer wanting your social security and other cards you don't have. Start a business, but you still have to pay taxes on that. And the IRS does not
Well,
decline your payment just because of your status.
I don't care what your status is or how you're getting paid. You can't avoid property taxes. You can't avoid sales taxes. They're paying all those taxes. Big chunks of these people have presented social security numbers, obviously somewhat fraudulently, but meaning they're having like social security and Medicare and Medicaid deducted from their paychecks, and they're not obviously going to be able to take part of that. I mean, the thing is, these people are all here just taking advantage and not paying in taxes, and that's largely not true, right? They actually are, again, paying property and sales taxes, and a lot of them are paying federal income taxes and contributing to social security and Medicaid. So it's like, well, they got to pay 10 grand. I'm thinking of all like the Bell's bondsmen right now that are like, ooh, here's a whole new group of people that we can, take advantage of to, provide, loan sharks, right?
Yeah.
Because most of these people, 10 grand's a lot of them. They don't have 10 grand laying around. If they had 10
I
grand
don't
laying around, then
think
maybe
Grand
they would
Land.
have, yeah. Well, the next one here I love. Individuals in the Dignity Program will not have access to federal means-tested benefits or entitlements. This is one I don't know why it was really gotten under my skin over the years, because I hear it all the time. Well, illegal shouldn't get food stamps. Legal shouldn't get Medicare. Legal shouldn't get They can't. They never have been. You don't need to write this into the law. It's already law. Right? Heck, if you are a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder, you can't get access to most of these benefits. I know, because guess what? My wife, right, is an immigrant, became a green card holder, is now a U.S. citizen, but I've personally experienced trying to apply for a benefit with my spouse, who was a green card holder, and being denied as not being eligible for a means tested benefit, right? So this whole thing, like, we have to go out of our way to point this out. This is just one of those political talking points where we want to appeal to our base. Hey, yeah, we're being tough here. And it's like, no, you're not, because that's already how it is. Now, again, there's some people that are like, well, I know Jose. Jose's an illegal alien and he's getting food stamps. And you go, does Jose have kids? Oh, yeah, he does. Are his kids U.S. citizens? Oh, yeah, they are. Well, he's getting food stamps on behalf of his kids. They're U.S. citizens and they're eligible for it. But now they're not going to give that money to a 5-year-old. They got to give it to someone, the person responsible taking care of them. So, I mean, it is possible they can receive money. But again, if it's husband and wife, 2 kids, and the parents don't have status, they're not getting food stamps for 4 people. They're getting food stamps for 2 people, for the 2 kids who are U.S. citizens and eligible. But of course, they have to give it to the parents, because who's going to manage the money? Um, I mean, there are some exceptions in there, like emergency Medicaid is one of them. Um, but in general, they don't have access to means tested benefits. Not even when they become residents. You have to have 40 quarters of employment to be eligible for for most benefits as a resident. Um, which at the time I was in law school, my wife was pregnant. She did not have 40 quarters of employment yet. So anyway, TMI, it's just a throwaway line that doesn't mean anything because that's how it already is. Now, this is interesting. The redemption program. So supposedly we have the 10-year dignity program, and then after that comes the 5-year redemption program. Come on, Andrew. What is this? What are we redeeming?
I'm not really sure, but I'm also noticing that if this stacks on it, there's 15 years. Let's see though. Redemption program optional, and individuals must complete the 10-year. Yeah, so this is now a 15-year program. 10-year dignity program to start the redemption program. It will offer a chance at redemption and to earn a more permanent legal status. The 5-year redemption program requires that participants learn English and U.S. civics and provides
Already required for citizenship. Anyway,
yeah, you already have to pass both of those tests, and provides the opportunity for those seeking permanent legal status to contribute to their local community, either through local volunteer work, national community service, or increased contributions to the American Worker Fund. So on top of that $10,000 you were paying, for the last 10 years, just a few more. Well, there's no number yet, but
you know what would be
same.
hilarious is if you had some like billionaire, like I don't know, Carlos Slim, who's Mexican, who just showed up and is like, I'm going to create a fund and I'm going to put $500 million in it. So for anyone that needs to pay for their quote dignity restitution, can just take from this fund and pay it. That would be awesome if that happened. It's not going to happen. But the whole thing, I mean, the whole thing here, I mean, it's kind of stupid. Is the you know the Republican idea of these people have to pay for what they did, and it's like, well, they didn't most of these people didn't commit a crime, right? Most of these people were just trying to better their life. They've been here, they've been working and contributing, they've been paying taxes. Again, for talking about recent arrivals, if we're talking about people with criminal backgrounds, it's totally different. But again, yeah, you're telling me I have someone that could have been here for 30 years. All of their kids are U.S. citizen. They've been working and paying taxes for those 30 years. But no, they got to wait 10 years, pay 10 grand, then wait another 5 years. It's like, no, that's stupid. I'm not saying that you flip the switch and say everything's given, but 15 years, 15 years.
I mean,
In
we
my
haven't
mind,
even
that's
gotten to your favorite line yet. Do you want me just to like wrap this up with your favorite part?
sure. Why not?
Because it does end with, so it'll open up eligibility for existing pathways to citizenship, but would not be a special pathway. And finally, individuals applying would go to the back of the line.
Jesus Christ. Um, Go to the back of the line. Okay, here's my first comment on, because again, I hear this all the time in Republican circles. They need to go to the back of the line. Okay, well, first off, for most of these people that we're talking about, there is no line, right? If there were, they would be in it and trying to regularize their status, but there's not a line, right? So you're saying, well, get to the back of the line. They'd be more than happy to get to the back of the line if there was a line. Secondly, when you apply for a benefit, like for residency, there are quotas, right? So like again, there's if you're like if I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm applying for my spouse, right? They can immediately apply for residency, right? But if I'm like a resident and I'm applying for my spouse, there may be a waiting period, right? Well, where your spot in that line is based on when you apply. So if this new benefit were to come into existence tomorrow, well, then I'm applying tomorrow, meaning I secured my place in line as tomorrow. I'm not jumping in front of someone who was already in line. Like the whole concept of go to the back of the line. I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Because again, for most of these people, there is no line. We would have to create a line for them, and of course, if you're the first one into the new line, um, you know, I mean, what line do they have to be in? Where are we going to stick them?
Well,
Um,
everyone needs to first form a line, and then everyone needs to systematically go back to the back of the line. So if everyone just takes one step back, I think, physically speaking, we've accomplished our goal, right?
And you don't, I mean, one thing people don't understand is like if you're an Indian national, you came here as a student, got an advanced degree, got a job at, working on an H-1B. You did everything right. You got educated, you got a visa, you're working for Facebook or Amazon. You did everything how you're supposed to. Facebook decides to sponsor you for residency. It all gets approved. How long are they going to have to wait before they can actually apply for residency?
Well, let's see. If you got your perm, you did all that certification, so you got a priority date of
Today,
February
priority
17th,
date today.
2022. Yeah, currently they're processing for 2012 and 2013, so probably about 10 years, roughly.
So Indian nationals are looking at this and just going, well, what the hell? We're already waiting 12 years, right? Because of the quota system that we have where we can only let so many people per country, right? They're already like, we're already waiting 12 to 13 years. So, I mean, the whole back of the line stuff is BS because, again, they say, well, they need to do things the right way. Well, if there had been a right way option, they would have taken it. The right way option doesn't exist. We've created a system that has promoted illegal immigration, right? It's not the people that are the problem, it's the system that doesn't work. And saying, well, then you go to the back of the line, it's like, or wait 15 years is ridiculous. Again, it's not to say that there's not going to be a I don't know, waiting period. I don't know, maybe like 5 years, right? Total. Like, hey, I apply for my work authorization, and after 5 years, I now can apply for residency. But again, the people tend to think that just because they're here, they can apply for residency. It's not a magic thing. The way residency works is I have to have a sponsor who's either an employer or a family member. So if I've been here 10 years on the redemption program, but I don't have a family member who's going to sponsor me, I can't magically suddenly apply for residency, right? To apply for residency, you have to have a sponsor. And again, if you're been here illegally, it doesn't even matter if you have a sponsor because you're inadmissible and you need a waiver. I think the idea is to say, well, if you get into the dignity program, and I'm saying maybe it's a 5-year program, if at the end of that 5 years, right, you have a sponsor, whether it's a family member or a business, then you should be able to move forward with the residency process because the having been in the program for 5 years is an automatic waiver, right? Something like that to be like, hey, I get this work authorization, I pay my taxes. As long as I'm good for 5 years, bam. If my employer wants to sponsor me for residency, they can because my 5 years makes me now eligible for an automatic waiver. I don't know. That's my idea. I'm just throwing off the top of my head something that's not a 15-year program where they're paying 10, 20, $30,000 to
Well,
go to
and
the
I,
back of the
I think
line.
just kind of build on that. I mean, the last line is enforcement through a functioning mandatory e-verify system. We already talked about that. And certification of a fully secure border will be completed before the redemption program can begin. Which, I mean, just building on what you were saying, like if we've already established a system that really encourages going about this the wrong way
Oh,
because there are no avenues, then essentially you've put off this program to fix the issue of having, I want to say around 12 million was the last statistic, 12 million undocumented immigrants in the US that you're not going to work with until you fix this problem that's getting worse by the day at the
well,
border.
the ironic thing is, it's like based on their own numbers, that means the redemption program can't start for 10 years, but it also can't start until they implement these other things, meaning you have 10 years to implement them. You should be able to freaking implement them. It would be just a travesty if you get to year 10 and everyone's like, okay, I'm ready for the redemption program. They're like, yeah, but we still haven't fully secured the border. So, I mean, this sounds a lot like, where the government was saying, "Hey, if you're a teacher and you go work in an underserved area, we'll forgive your student loans." And then 98% of the people that applied got denied. Like, where the government promised something, and then now Biden administration is actually working really hard to fix that specific case. But it's just an example of the government saying, "We got you," and then completely screwing people over for years. To say
And oh, sorry.
some nefarious, if we have, I don't know, Donald Trump Jr. as president in 10 years, he could just be like, yeah, I'm not certifying the borders ready, so that the redemption program would never kick in. I mean, I get it because from the Republican standpoint, right, they're saying, we'll give you this if you give us security, right? And the Democrats are saying, well, no, we want this, and then we'll give you security, right? And the Republicans are afraid of is that if they give this away, they'll never get the security, because that's kind of what they feel happened in like the 1980s, right? Where they're like, oh, we'll do amnesty and we'll get security. Well, they gave the amnesty and didn't necessarily follow through on the security, right? So there's that whole like push and pull between the two sides, each saying like, no, you show, if I get mine, I'll give you yours. Other ones saying the exact same thing. Well, no, I want mine, and I'll give you yours. And there's that push and pull. And of course, they're going to have to come to some compromise before anything happens in terms of when things get enacted and the timelines. So we're going to jump here to this last section. This last section's, I mean, it focuses a little bit more on employment-related stuff. So first, we're saying, well, hey, if they're paying into this fund $10,000, what's being done with that? Well, here's what we know. Creates an American worker fund using restitution payments from the dignity and redemption programs at no cost to taxpayers. Okay, well, I mean, so you're funding whatever this is at no cost, I guess, because we know where you're getting the money from, but that I don't think there's going to be enough money there to then also pay for the border security stuff. But anyway, this provides grants to American citizens for workforce education initiatives, apprenticeships programs, and career and technical education to give opportunities for Americans to enter new careers. So illegal immigrants are paying for Americans to get educated. I'm looking at one of those things, and it's like, we should already be investing in this, and we shouldn't have to do it off the backs of immigrants. Like, this is something we should be investing in. Duh. Why do we need this anyway? For every 10,000 paid by one immigrant in the dignity program, this can retrain at least 2 American workers. I guess we're figuring like, hey, this is how we're going to retrain all the coal miners from West Virginia, is off the backs of the immigrants trying to regularize their status.
Trying to figure out what kind of training you can get for $5,000, because in Texas, I don't know of a public school that you can still go to and get more than a semester.
Hey, having money there to train people, especially when you talk about like areas where certain industries are maybe dying or slowing down, and saying, hey, these coal miners, there's no more coal for them to mine, or they're not being allowed to mine the coal. We need to train them to do something else. Like, I don't know, maybe like write computer code. Great. I mean, the fact those types of educational programs are a good thing and should exist and should, the government should be promoting. It's just weird that they figure that they'll do it off the backs of immigrants to pay for the program. Ooh, I like this one. Implements a market-based solution. There's our buzzword. Market-based solution for our labor shortages by expanding and modernizing the H-2A agriculture guest worker program to adequately respond to workforce needs. Andrew, what's a market-based solution?
My guess is that it's kind of like the Canadian system that we hear about, where instead of setting just this is the number of people that, or the number of visas that we're going to give to people, it's a, where's our market this year? Do we have high unemployment, high employment? If we're reaching that point where we have everyone's got a job, then maybe we can give more visas. If a lot of people are out of work, then we're not going to let people in to take the jobs that are here.
So in Canada, it's called the Labor Market Impact Assessment, LMIA, and kind of the theory behind it is it's not like here where we have like a quota. Hey, you have 85,000 H-1Bs, period. Doesn't matter, economy great, economy bad, 85,000, right? The Canadian system, again, this is an overgeneralization, but the LMIA basically says, look, if I can prove that I tried to get a U.S. worker and couldn't, I can get whoever I want for whatever job I need, right? The idea being I can hire someone to cook fries at McDonald's if the economy's hot and I can't get an employee. And if the economy's bad, I can't get anybody. Like I can't get any foreigner, right? Because there's so many people out of work. What's hilarious is, okay, I understand that, right? There's been proposals in the past that for the H-1B, which is capped at 85,000, to say, rather than having a hard cap, the 85,000 should be a floor, and they should do a ceiling, let's say 195, and then every year, right, they can look at the economy and say, okay, this year we're going to do 120, or this year we're going to do 150. Oh, wait, no, economy tanked, COVID, we're only going to do 85, right? To be able to have a number, there's a bottom range, top range, and adjust that number. But here's the thing. What's the cap for H-2A visas?
Yeah, there isn't one. right?
What the hell is your market-based solution? There is no goddamn cap for H-2As. There is for H-2Bs. If you're saying you want a market-based solution for H-2Bs, like I just mentioned for H-1Bs, that would make sense to say, yeah, 66,000 H-2Bs is a ridiculously low number, especially when the economy's hot like it is right now in terms of people trying to hire. Like, shouldn't that number be easily adjustable? But making this market-based for H-2As makes no, like, I'm like, what are you even talking about? And a market-based solution administered by the Department of Labor and the federal government, and we know they're great about market-based stuff.
Super
Now
efficient too.
now expanding and modernizing, great. That should be written into every single visa category down the roll. Expand, modernize, expand, modernize, expand, modernize. Because again, we're still having to run Sunday ads in the newspaper when we do our recruitment because, yeah, that's where people go to find jobs is the newspaper, but they haven't updated anything in 30 years. And you're still running, well, actually, H2As is the one exception to the newspaper ads. But anyway, I would say, why is this just H2As? Why is this not H2Bs, H1Bs? Why is this not, in terms of expand and modernize? It should just be all non-immigrant visa categories. And again, the whole market-based solution thing is like, okay, that could apply to H2Bs, 1Bs. I don't see how it applies to H2As because there's no cap. Updates the antiquated definition of farming to reflect modern-day farming practices, setting a policy that works for all America's farmers, growers, and ranchers. Yeah, I have no idea what they mean by that until I see actual
Or why
the
it's in the
antiquated
immigration.
the antiquated definition of farming. I mean, to me, it's not about the definition of farming. It's that the H2A is for temporary or seasonal work, and it's not the definition of farming that's so much a problem. It's that it's required to be seasonal, right? So if you're a dairy operation, you're screwed because you're not seasonal. If you're growing corn, you're seasonal. If you're growing soybeans, you're seasonal. If you're doing dairy, you're not seasonal. Or if you're like a greenhouse grower of tomatoes, like what's Nature Sweet's the big one, right? You're not seasonal. You're year round. So what you're basically prohibited from using the H2A just so happens that your operation is year round. It's not the definition so much of, again, there may be something I'm missing here because I don't know all the nuances of H2As, but it sounds like it's more like the definition of seasonal. See, provides wage stability for farmers and ensures a resilient and reliable agricultural commodity supply chain. What?
Again, I thought this was an immigration bill.
Wage stability for farmers. I mean, the H2As are or the wages are already governed by the Department of Labor. They have to get a prevailing wage, which is based on the job and the area of employment. So in terms of wage stability, if you're a farmer trying to hire H2As, you already know what the wage is going to be. The Department of Labor, you can go right now onto the FLC data center and look it up and find it. Okay. Combats food price inflation so families can continue to have access to affordable groceries and a large variety of products that originate from American farms. Okay. I mean,
Again, it just sounds like new
I
farm
just
subsidies to me.
I'm just like, what does this have to do with what we're the Dignity Act? The way to combat food price inflation is to ensure that these farmers are actually able to get the guys that they need to come in and pick the food, right? Because there's tons of stories of these guys not being able to get the people they need, and Americans will not do these jobs, and then like them losing crop because they weren't able to, essentially pick it on time. And of course, that drives up the price. And then includes the H-2B Returning Worker Exception Act to ensure that small and seasonal businesses can fulfill their labor needs and contribute to our nation's post-pandemic economic recovery. What I'm assuming this means is that in years, Congress has, so H-2Bs have a cap, 66,000 a year. Now, last couple of years, they've actually raised the cap because 66 is an absurdly low number. I mean, doubling that is not even a good start. Like tripling it should be like your starting point. But in years past, they've exempted returning workers from the cap. So if I got a bunch of bricklayers from Mexico to come in and work for me for this, 8-month period, and then the next year I also applied for these 10 bricklayers and I got the same guys, they would be exempt from the camp. But that's the thing that Congress kind of does when they feel like it's not permanent. So I'm thinking what they're saying here is that there's a proposal on the board to essentially make that returning worker exception permanent. So it would increase the number of people that can get an H-2B per year, because again, you have some of these guys that, they come in, work for 8 months, go home for 4, come back in for 8, go home, and that's just what they do. And that sounds like a great program, except the way it's administered by the Department of Labor and USCIS makes it just impossible for anyone to actually use. So I would say overall, there are some obviously good ideas here, ideas that have a lot of consensus. There are some bad ideas. There are some just a lot of buzz language and jargon that doesn't really mean anything. I would say my main takeaway from this is the fact that there is a Republican proposal that includes an option for the people here without status, right? Because that's been the one area where they've sort of refused to really negotiate. But at least I don't like this weird 10-year, then 5-year, 15-year program thing, but at least they've put an option down on the table to say, we're willing to deal on this, right? Now I only would hope that Democrats in good faith would see this and negotiate back. Okay, we don't like this 15-year program. Can we cut it down to 5? What do you want in exchange? The problem is everything we see these days is my way or the highway. I'm 100% right. You're 100% wrong. No one wants to negotiate. Because if we go look at the Build Back Better bill, which was this thing proposed by the Biden administration, it did include some immigration provisions in the Build Back Better bill. Again, hasn't passed. But one of the current provisions is it would make unauthorized aliens eligible for immigration parole if they had entered the United States before 2011, and resided continuously in the country since then. Basically, if you've been here for more than 10 years without status, you would be able to get work authorization. It's essentially kind of like DACA, but for everyone else, right? So you're seeing, well, wait a second, what I'm seeing here in the Build Back Better, what I'm seeing here from this Republican congressman, I mean, there is some overlap, and that's the good thing. Let's focus on the overlap, right? As the basis for trying to come to a consensus. Okay, I'm going to have to give up some things I want. I'm going to have to give you some things you want, but in return, I'm also going to get some things I do want. And that's just how this, I guess, should work, but is not. To say, I don't think this is a great bill as is, but I am at least pleased to see some Republicans at least, coming to the table on this issue. And obviously, I really hope the Democrats engage them in good faith to actually try to come up with something. We need our immigration system is broken. We need to fix something. Andrew, how do you feel about this proposal?
I think like you said, like at least it's something, and there's 1 or 2 points that hopefully form common ground. But I personally don't see anything happening from Congress for a very long time.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, especially with the upcoming midterm elections. But it's like, hey, look, they're willing to deal on doing something for the people that are here without status, those 12 million, however many they are, right? And it looks like the main thing they want in exchange is some enforcement stuff. So look, if I can get a pathway to regularization, again, it's not an immediate amnesty. It would be, let's say, a 5 years on a work permit and then a potential for residency. If I can secure a pathway to residency for these 12 million people, again, we're excluding the ones that have criminal backgrounds and other issues. And in exchange, I got to build the damn wall. Then just build the damn wall. Right? I mean, I think it's maybe a waste of money, but if this is what we get in exchange, do it, deal on it. Oh, wait, a question popped up. Great. Someone's actually watching this live. I love it. Can I go from DACA to EB3? Well, I guess that really depends on whether you accumulated, how you entered, and whether or not you accumulated unlawful presence, right? So if you entered, let's say, lawfully as a student or as a tourist, and then just overstayed, you technically don't begin accruing unlawful presence until you turn 18. So if you let's say you got your DACA before you turned 18, you entered on a tourist visa, overstayed, and then got DACA before you turned 18, you technically didn't accrue any unlawful presence. So your employer could go through with the EB-3, like I'm assuming this would be a perm labor certification, and you might actually be able to apply for residency. But the question at that point would be, would you be able to adjust status in the U.S. or would you have to leave and adjust status abroad? But I guess the key is that if you haven't accumulated enough unlawful presence, even if you had to leave to adjust status, you would not need a waiver, right? We've seen a number of, for example, we have a number of clients right now. We're doing like EB-2s and EB-3/4s that entered as a tourist and then timely filed for asylum. And now we're doing the perm labor certification, and they're not subject to a bar, they're not inadmissible, but in order to conclude the residency process, they will have to do it abroad, right? Because they technically haven't accumulated any lawful presence, but they don't technically also have a status because they're like pending asylum. So is it possible? Yes. Is it possible to do it in the US though? Again, we'd have to see all the facts. And one of the keys would be, when did you get your DACA? I'm just doing this off the top of my head. My answer is going to be no. I think even if you got your DACA on time and didn't accrue more than 6 months of unlawful presence, you would still have to, we would do the perm, it'd get approved. We file the I-140, it'd get approved, but then it would have to be for consular notification. You'd have to conclude outside the US. That is just off the top of my head. But again, if you entered as a child and didn't get your DACA until you're like 21, you accrued over more than a year of unlawful presence. You're subject to the 10-year bar. You would likely need a waiver if you're doing it through employment. Now, if you entered lawfully and you're subject to a 10-year bar, but you marry a U.S. citizen, that's a different story. So a lot depends on the facts. It's not, it's technically not a change of status, it's an adjustment of status. Could you adjust status? Yeah, no, I guess I'm relitigating this in my head, but I'm thinking no, but you may be able to do it abroad and not require a waiver. Hopefully that answers your question. But hey, look, we've been talking a lot here. We had fun walking through this thing. It's an interesting proposal. I'm glad to see at least some Republicans are thinking about this. But if you have any questions about your own status, right, go online, go to our website, schedule a consultation. Whether it's employment-based, you can talk to Andrew and I, but whether it's about asylum, litigation, deportation, you can talk with one of our other great attorneys that specialize in that. Whatever it may be, we can help work out and try to find your immigration solution. So go to our website, download our app, also the Law Pilot Guardian. You can find it on Android or iOS. It's got a lot of useful tips and tools and information there. A lot of stuff about know your rights in English and Spanish. We're adding more features. So obviously, download that app. Check us out. Also, look at our other videos, especially Andrew and I are doing all the employment-based videos. If you have any questions there, and let us know. But hey, if you tuned in, then we thank you for tuning into our videos. And hey, look, if you have any questions you want answered, let us know. Maybe we'll do a video on some more specific questions and cases. Andrew, thanks as always for helping out and being a part. And until then, we'll see you all next week with our next video.